Much like self-concept is affected by self-awareness, it is also impacted through self-esteem and how we choose to disclose. Self-esteem is an evaluation of self-worth. So in many cases, our positive or negative self-esteem works in a cyclical pattern where if we have negative self-thoughts, we participate in undesirable behavior, and then those negative thoughts reoccur and the cycle starts all over. Now, the same process can kind of work with positive feelings of self-esteem as well. Now, this is all what is called the self-fulfilling prophecy, or at least a portion of that. Self-fulfilling prophecy is the moment in which you feel you are capable or able to do something, or in the reverse, incapable of doing something. You act as if it's true, and then it becomes true. So if you look at this symbol here, we start with a belief about ourselves. Maybe that belief is that you are not good at math. And then you have expectations about that belief. I know that when I do math, it is stressful for me. I have to study a lot, and even then I have a hard time comprehending the material. So these are those expectations you have. Then because of those expectations, you behave towards that issue with these behavioral patterns that represent the expectations. So I will behave as if I will not do well at math. And if a test is coming up or some kind of major project, I'm going to act as if this is not something that'll be easily done for me. So in some cases, I might stress completely while I'm trying to study for the exam. Or maybe you don't study at all because you know that you're going to fail anyway. Because I've had that behavior, I then go to the action, which in this case, in our example, is to test over the topic, the math topic. And then because of that, the stressing that I did during studying, or the fact that I didn't study at all because I just knew I would fail anyway, causes me to then fail the exam. And then because I have failed the exam, I then reinforce that first belief that I'm not good at math. So the self-fulfilling prophecy is this cyclical pattern related very much so to the idea of fixed mindset, where you believe that you're only capable of a certain level and you act as if that's true, and then because you've acted as if you could only reach a certain level, it becomes true. So self-fulfilling prophecies are a major part of how we determine and develop our self-concept. In addition to that, we can develop our self-concept through the act of self-disclosure. Now, when we talk about interpersonal communication, self-disclosure is a major part of that. This image here is from the movie Shrek, in which Shrek is talking about how ogres are like onions. And he mentions that ogres have layers. Well, self-disclosure is similar to that. If you've ever cooked with an onion before, you know that when you grab them out of the store or out of a basket or what have you, the outer layer of an onion is very transparent, sort of flaky, falls off easily, sometimes makes a mess. That is the breadth, the outside of a self-disclosure experience. So you feel as if that anything that is broad or simple is easy to reveal. So we tend to reveal information like our favorite sports team, maybe your career path, specific likes and dislikes, basic information about yourself. That's the flaky part of the onion. And as you peel the onion, as you get deeper into self-disclosure, the layers, and again, if you've ever cooked with an onion, you know that the layers tend to get thicker as we get down to the core of the onion. And then they also get more stinky. So the center of the onion becomes very high strength in its smell, and it actually can sometimes make you cry. You can kind of think of self-disclosure like that. The closer you get to the center, the more intense the feeling is and the riskier the disclosure is. And the more difficult it is, the thicker the layers. So self-disclosure does have a sense of breadth and depth, and there are benefits and risks to revealing information about yourself when you are communicating in an interpersonal relationship, especially at the very beginning. Now, some of the benefits might be things like catharsis, which is just letting things go and getting them out. It's a feeling of relaxation once you've removed the burden. So, it might be a sense of catharsis. It could be a need for reciprocity. You're hoping that they will again reciprocate the self-disclosure, so you provide that to them in the first place. You may be doing it for self-clarification purposes. Maybe you think to yourself, I'm not 100% sure why I feel how I feel, or I want to make sure I understand where I'm seeing this. And so you disclose in order to clarify that. Another one would be self-validation. You want to hear them say what you did or what you're thinking is right. So you disclose that information in order to get validated back. Identity management, so revealing something about yourself, similar to the idea of presenting self, in which you want to present a certain type of information. And so you use self-disclosure to relay that information and create this identity. Also, relationship maintenance and enhancement is another one in which you use relationship to self-disclosure in order to either maintain the relationship and keep it going, or even enhance it by revealing more higher depths of information. And then also another benefit could just be social influence. That's similar to what we'd call name dropping. That's the kind of social influence we're referring to. Talking about successes, achievements, or experiences that might increase your social influence. Now, these are all benefits of self-disclosure, but there are risks in that area as well. One, you could be rejected based on what you said. You could form a negative impression, either through a disclosure of a belief or a disclosure of too much information or not enough. Another one would be a decrease in relational satisfaction. If you are very blunt in a relationship, it may or may not be of value. It just depends on that person, but there is a risk of decreasing relational satisfaction if you relay information very openly. Also, loss of influence. Let's say you have a political or religious belief that you feel very strongly about and you reveal that information. You do risk losing influence with, say, a boss or coworkers or employees or instructor or fellow students or what have you, if you reveal information that is counter to them. So there's a risk to that. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it is a risk. Another one is potentially hurting the other person. So revealing information that you know you need to, but in some cases that could pose a risk in that it would hurt them. So all of these benefits and risks are part of how we determine what we're going to disclose, how we're going to disclose it, and when we're going to disclose it. And with that, the final thing we want to look at in terms of self-disclosure are some guidelines to keep in mind. You want to ask yourself some questions when you consider the idea of self-disclosure and whether or not it's appropriate for that moment. Do you have a moral obligation to disclose this information? And is that person that you're disclosing to, are they important to you? Are they valuable to you? And is the amount of information or that type of disclosure that you're using, is that appropriate? And then consider, are the risks reasonable? Is it worth it to disclose this information to not just you, but to the relationship on the whole? And then, is the disclosure relevant at this moment? Maybe you should consider the timing. Will it be constructive when you do disclose it? Is it clear? Is it understandable? And do you think that this could be reciprocated? These are all good questions to ask yourself when determining whether or not you should talk about something at a given moment in time. Self-disclosure, self-awareness, and self-esteem are all intricate components that build a certain self-concept in which you can use in your interpersonal relationships in order to build and, in some cases, break them down.